Hello everyone, and congratulations. This is what a feminist country looks like. Sweden has prioritized gender and women's issues for years. Even its foreign policy is feminist. Moreover, Sweden is the best country in the world when it comes to gender equality in film. This is probably a familiar story, and the question I want to ask tonight is not, is it true? But what does this story do? Why is it so popular? Why is it important to not only celebrate the headlines in Hollywood, the inclusion of no less than 3 Swedes in the Gina Davis-produced documentary, This Changes Everything, and just for the sake of provocation, even the election of our supreme host tonight, Swedish Helene Grönqvist, as president of WIFTI, in sum, the particular promise that Sweden seems to hold in the transnational imagination about a more equal film industry. And let me be clear, the answer is not jantelagen. This is great. Of course, Helene and the other hard-working proponents of women in film and television should be given all credits. I am also cheerful about the promise of this story. It feels as if change is possible and it creates hope. But as scholars and activists, we have to look underneath the surface of the success story and examine its meanings. Our job as academics is to analyze and complicate and to share our insights. So I warmly welcome this initiative from WIFTI. The gap between academia and the wider community is often too big. And this is certainly the case in the current work and debate on gender equality in Swedish film. As a researcher, it can be difficult to get involved in the polarized public conversation with its quick and clear-cut standpoints. To me, the terms of the debate also seem stuck with a different set of issues than I, as a feminist, queer, and anti-racist film scholar, would want to raise. The criticism currently directed at the Swedish Film Institute's by now world-famous gender equality program focuses mainly on its potential negative effects on artistic freedom. Critics warn against what is perceived as an ideological control of cultural production and content. Drastic statements about totalitarian methods have even been made. To a large extent, the alarmist tone evokes contemporary white male imaginary and rage against those who threaten their privilege, those who are perceived to be given permission to cut the line at their expense. For sure, the Film Institute's production support was never a neutral procedure. It was no less biased before, when almost only men would get it, even if they presumably got it under the banner of quality rather than equality. So I encourage measures for a more equal industry, but the strategies need critical assessment. What are the normative workings of gender equality politics, and why is it gaining currency only now, at this moment in time, when women have fought for these issues for years? So over 40 years ago, Bibi Andersson, who sadly left this life last month, made these radical claims. Along with Mai Zetterling and women from 16 different countries, she formed part of launching the organization Film Women International in 1975. And this is just one example of a vivid film culture that gave rise to numerous women's film festivals, collectives, publications, and films, and indeed to WIFTI, that luckily still exists, while much of the film culture, and especially in Sweden, has been forgotten by history. And so, as we are losing a radical generation of feminist filmmakers who crucially transformed cinema, Caroline Schneemann, Agnes Weida, and Barbara Hammer, just in the last month, couple of months, I want to take this moment to honor their groundbreaking achievements that paved the way for us today. So Sweden's current reputation as a feminist country owes much to the 1970s and its women-friendly welfare reforms. And today, even as the welfare system has transformed into privatization and market logics, the notion of gender equality has remained a fundamental piece of the imagined Swedish community. To be a Swede is to be gender equal, as the authors of the recent book Challenging the Myth of Gender Equality in Sweden writes. The notion of gender equality, they very critically contend, has become a mantra that reproduces nationalism and whiteness, hetero and cis norms. When it comes to the film industry, the difference between our moment and the 70s is that today the Swedish government declares that gender equality and diversity should characterize Swedish film. Yet striving towards equality at the same time that commercial considerations increasingly inform the film policy can seem paradoxical. By current neoliberal logics, culture, as well as gender equality, should be profitable in order to be justifiable. And consequently, the notion that gender equality benefits everyone has become pervasive. Today, it is often argued that since the Film Institute launched the equality program, Swedish film has become more internationally successful, with more films selected for and competing at A-list festivals. Following the same logic, gender equality is also seen as strengthening the image of Sweden in the world, and thus facilitating trade. The already mentioned feminist foreign policy that Sweden launched in 2014 states, Swedish trade and promotion policy aims to promote Swedish economic interests and Sweden's image abroad. One aspect of foreign policy involves promoting Swedish values and spreading the image of Sweden around the world. Gender equality is an important part of this image. So one point here could be that with gender equality holding such value, Swedish feminists today have the wind in their back, and unlike their older sisters in the 70s, they have the mandate to actually impact policy making, even in the film industry. But on the other hand, isn't there something missing from the equation? What about the second part of the government directives for Swedish film? Can go back to that. Diversity. How come this issue seems to have been put on hold? The directives have been around for over 10 years, but while gender equality by now amounts to a significant pile of policy documents and reports from the Film Institute, there is a striking lack of measures and policies regarding diversity, and the notion is remarkably vaguely defined. Rather than explicitly addressing issues of marginalization, such as race, class, or sexuality, it seems more or less to imply any kind of plurality of stories and formats. And this is the question I hope to discuss in our panel. But to round up here, as much as we want to celebrate potential progress, we must also be cautious not to let the success story or myth about gender equality in Swedish film disguise remaining problems and injustices, just because they do not fit into the story's linear and profitability logic or reliance on statistics. So with this talk, I want to make a call for a more complex and self-critical discussion beyond the polarized positions in the current debate. Thank you.